Welcome to this week's Emuna dose for Shabbat Kodesh. Today we're going to talk about not being finished. You see, from a very brief reading of the commandment and the explanation of Shabbat, we see that on the seventh day, so to speak, in Sefer Bereshis, if we want to quote it, it says, "And Hashem blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, for on it he ceased from all his work that Hashem created." So in other words, when you look at it on the surface, on a most simplistic level, it would appear as if Hashem had finished the work of creation on the sixth day, and that's why he needed to rest on the seventh day, because everything was done. When essentially that's not really what we're taught on a more deeper level. The Midrash actually brings down that the work was still unfinished. In other words, Hashem ceased to work on the seventh day, not because he had finished what he needed to finish, so to speak, but because Shabbat came. And so when Shabbat came, it meant I need to stop. So when Hashem completed all his work on the sixth day, there was still essentially something more to do, but he decided to rest and act as though, so to speak, again, this is all very simplistically trying to explain to us in human terms, that there was as if nothing more to be done. But we have to understand that, again, it's because Shabbat had arrived on the scene, that is why Hashem essentially stopped his work. So what are we learning from this? Hashem wants to teach us from this, that even though a person could feel as though his work is never done, and most of us essentially feel that, we have to put everything aside, just like Hashem did, in order to experience Shabbat. So in other words, even though in our mind we might obviously know that there's more for us to do, what we need to understand is that we won't be able to experience that connectedness with Hashem unless we, so to speak, emulate that particular activity of ceasing to do what we're used to doing for those 6 days. What happens on Shabbat as a result of us ceasing the mundane work of the 6 days? Hashem unites our soul root, and this is very complex and Kabbalistic. I'm not 100% obviously in depth of it either, but there are 5 levels of the soul, 3 of which we interact in this world, called Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. And then there's 2 soul roots that are on high, that we're always connected to, but we don't consciously interact with in this world. That's called Chaya and Yechidah. On Shabbat Kodesh and Yom Tovim, Hashem gives us the merit, the zchut, to attach and to unite with these 2 other aspects or levels of our soul, which is called the soul root. And that, essentially, when we connect to the roots, we get nourished, and what essentially it produces within us is this intense divine awareness. But in order for us to completely unite, again, it has to be a complete and mutual act from both ends. So we need to do our share, and essentially Hashem makes sure that on the other side it also happens from the soul root, that it is essentially connected to us as well. What does that mean in practical terms? It means that just as Hashem sanctified the day of Shabbat, and he stopped all of his work in order to make sure, so to speak, again, we're using very simplistic terms, in order to join Am Yisrael in perfect intimacy, so too Hashem asks of us that we cease our work. And, we all know with today's distractions of everyday life, we don't unfortunately communicate with one another. There's always something distracting us. But when you put everything down, you put your cell phone down, you move the computer aside, and you move everything aside, and you have a face-to-face conversation with someone, there's a level of intimacy, there's a level of course of closeness that even in thought, even if two people aren't saying anything, but they're not distracted by anything else, and they're one in thought, that's also a level of uniting. And so the idea is to disengage with all those worldly concerns so that we can unite with Hashem on all levels. And that's why it's so important that we uproot any type of thought of worldly needs or goals, to feel as if everything is completed, so we can reach that level of dot, we can reach that level of knowing that Hashem is with us, wants to be close to us, and now I'm paying attention to my spiritual aspect of my life, and only that. So let's try to achieve that lofty level, Be'ezrat Hashem, and make it a wonderful, wonderful Shabbat Kodesh.